Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what plot twists, or crazy antics or demands have you seen go down from either spouse? Took the couple 2 hours to decide who would get the groceries left in the fridge. Estimated value of the groceries was around $40. 2 hours of my time, opposing counsel time, and mediator time added up to about $1,000. It all came down to a Costco Sam's Club sized jar of peanut butter. Who keeps peanut butter in the fridge? This is what happens when you negotiate on an empty stomach. I had a couple arguing for 3 hours over who got the kids on Christmas Day, only to discover at the end that they were both Jewish. I had another woman who said that her husband drained $60,000 from their community bank account to pay for a sex change operation that he never told her he was planning to do. I hate it when I find out I'm Jewish. I was a clerk for a law firm in Marin County. The husband grew weed in the house. The town was supportive and even let him redo his electrical panel to accommodate his crop. Long story short, in the divorce, she demanded half of the weed proceeds. Today it doesn't seem like a big deal, but 12 years ago I was shocked to see that in a court document. My dad was a divorce attorney for some time. He said people would argue over $150 patio furniture for hours on end at a $300 HR rate each side. It's not about the patio furniture, it's about sending a message to your beloved ex-husband wife. I had a case where the estranged wife was calling my client's employer repeatedly, accusing him of theft and other white-collar crimes, to try getting my client fired. The thing is, the children were with her, and she was also demanding child support, which is based on his income, for the job from which she was trying to get him fired. Fortunately, the employer was onto her BS and my client wasn't let go. The ex-wife hid his artwork, works he had purchased long before the marriage, and in mediation she tried to sell it back to him. And then, not necessarily a crazy divorce story, but my dad is a lawyer and his friend has been married 3 times, so my dad has been his divorce lawyer twice and his best man 3 times. I love serial groom's brides. I have an uncle who has been married so many times, 5, that his own parents didn't even travel to his last 2 weddings. Grandma, I'm so excited to see you at Pete's wedding. Sorry, kid. I've got a bowling tournament that weekend and I've seen him get married plenty of times. My now ex-stepmother was getting an 80/20 settlement and refused to agree until the agreement was revised include a bag of old beer can koozies and a dry rotted pool float. She was crazy, which is why dad was paying her to go away. I'm not a lawyer, but this is a story about my uncle and it's quite brilliant. My uncle has been a lifelong videographer and still works to this day as a news photographer. During the early to late 90s he stopped shooting news and started shooting freelance. This was before everyone and their moms had a camera editing software whatnot. Eventually he became a sought after photographer. In the 80s when he was working as a news photographer he met and married a reporter news anchor of which he would go on to have 2 children with. After leaving the news business to freelance he decided to start a video editing business with his wife. That went extremely well for a while and they were making money hand over fist. He would be asked to shoot for channels such as Food Network and HGTV, DIY, etc. and then edit it into the show. She would work as the middle woman for his clients and as bookkeeper. Eventually she would turn out to be a secret substance abuser and adulterer and their marriage ended in divorce. At this point my uncle was making a couple $100K a year with their business. She decided to sue him for alimony, mostly because he was worth a good chunk of change, but also because she helped him build his business. Her demands were ridiculous, something like 75% of the business for the next so many years or something crazy. My uncle's lawyer was afraid she was going to win because she had played such a big role in building the biz. Fast forward to court day, her lawyer stands in front of the judge and lists off what she wants in the divorce. Once he is finished it's my uncle's turn. He blindsides her and offers to give her 100% of the business. The judge and both lawyers are confused and ask him if he is sure. Without him shooting and editing there is no business. So basically she would be left with a heck of a lot less than she asking for by asking for X amount of profits. The judge reasoned that his offer was fair and that she could take it or leave it. She was P, her lawyer was P and she ended up getting nothing. Haha. TLDR. My uncle started a biz with his wife. She turned into a cheating drug addict. Divorce. She wanted X% of profits from biz and divorce. He offers her the entire business. Total awesome dong move. He is a photo editor, so she can't do crap with biz because she isn't a photo editor. She gets nothing. Your uncle is a genius. I love to read stories like this. I was in a mediation where it took the couple an hour and a half to split their personal property, retirement accounts, real property, and custody of their 6-month-old son. The rest of the day, about 4 hours, was spent arguing about how to split the time with the dog for the kid they just put, as agreed upon by the parties, but the dog had a strict calendared schedule working out holidays and strict pickup drop-off times. I was ashamed to be a part of that unbelievable display. My parents stayed together for years because they couldn't agree on who got the dog when they divorced. They announced to my brother and I that they were divorcing the day we had to put the dog down. My friend's ex-husband tried to force their daughter to have to choose which parent she would live with every year on her birthday. The daughter wanted to live with mom. Dad is always out of town for work anyway. The judge told him that in no way was he going to force this girl to disappoint one of her parents every year on her birthday. Her ex-husband is a dong. Not a lawyer, but I work in a law office. We had a guy who cheated on his wife transfer all of his money, slowly over time, to his girlfriend before the wife found out about their affair and file for bankruptcy to avoid having to give his now ex-wife anything in the divorce. That's dissipation of marital assets and the court would have ordered it returned. Also, bankruptcy judge has no authority over division of marital assets, child support, etc. Not a divorce attorney, but I clerked for a judge that handled divorce cases. We had a couple that were both lieutenant colonels in the Air Force. They had one daughter that was about 11 or 12. Both had graduate degrees and were generally intelligent people. Well, the husband had an affair and things went sour with the relationship. The daughter was at that age when her relationship with the mother was starting to get a little strained, and she mentioned how she wanted to stick with her dad because he was about to be stationed elsewhere and the parents would be going there. Separate ways. The mother absolutely freaked. The first thing she did was go to the local police department and claim the father had been molesting and raping the daughter. They investigated and couldn't find any evidence, so they dropped the case. The mother, still furious, then goes to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and reports the same thing. The Air Force then suspends the husband from duty and conducts their own investigation. Same result, no evidence of wrongdoing, and the case is dropped. The mother then goes to the next state over where the husband is about to be transferred and contacts the local police there with the same story about molestation and rape. They of course do their own investigation, but same result. Case is dropped. Of course, this whole time the daughter has been interviewed a dozen times by psychologists, various therapists, the police, the Air Force, and who knows else. The daughter is straight up traumatized by this. People constantly asking her if her dad had been touching her, raping her, and so forth. Not to mention the harm it did to her father's career. He was basically screwed from any possible promotion just because of the allegations, as well as the fact that infidelity in the military is a big no-no. But that was his own doing. Well, once word of all this gets back to the judge, he is furious. He's a former Air Force JAG and still has contacts in the ranks. Well, anyway, the couple comes in front of him one day for a hearing and he outright tells her she better stop this behavior or he is going to hold her in contempt of court for the maximum amount of time he can lawfully hold her in a cell. Contact the DA and recommend the filing of charges. Contact her Air Force superiors and recommend reprimand to the fullest extent possible, and basically anything and everything he can do within his power. It was one of the most messed up things I've seen during my relatively short experience in the legal world. Surely she belongs in jail for such repeated, extreme slander. When my parents got divorced, my dad had written in the divorce decree that my mother could not make any religious decisions for me, including regular church attendance, baptisms, etc. My mother was raised Mormon and my father was pretty adamant that I would not be raised in that religion too. As a lawyer who did a stint in high asset divorce law, this is pretty standard. I've written this clause into settlement agreements a lot. A father and his friend go to pick up his child for some time together. He rings the buzzer of the apartment. No reply. He phones too. No answer. This is odd, because he is there at the scheduled time and the mother never misses an opportunity to claim that he doesn't care about spending time with his child and that he routinely misses scheduled times together. The father and the friend figure that's odd. Let's walk around back to the parking lot to see if her car is still here. They go around to the back to find the mother and child sneaking down the back stairs to leave the building. The child sees the father, yells hi, daddy, then turns to his mother and says, "See? I told you dad was coming to see me today." I was a clerk for a family court judge. We had a woman try to get an injunction to keep the father from taking the daughter on a trip to Disney World to play in a concert. It was sad. This is a true story and it happened in New Jersey. Guy getting a divorce becomes suspicious and insanely jealous that his separated wife is having an affair. He secretly follows her to a bar and waits outside in his car. She comes out many hours later in the dark and follows another car to a house. Husband follows her, staying back, and parks down the block. He gets out, sees the house her car is parked at, and goes around into the backyard. He's sneaking around looking in windows and finally opens a sliding glass door and enters the house. His wife and the guy she is with hear him moving around, lock the bedroom door, and call 911. He starts pounding on the bedroom door and shouting at his wife, and then the cops kick in the front door. The cops get everyone downstairs to sort this out. That is when the guy realized for the first time his wife was sleeping with his own divorce lawyer. The lawyer got in lots of trouble. Definitely one of the most entertaining ethical board decisions of all time. One of my uncle's ex-wives actually hired a hitman to kill my uncle so she could collect his life insurance. The hitman was actually an undercover cop. She did 4 years for the crime. If this gets any response, I'll tell a more in-depth version of the story. Some crazy crap happened. In all honesty, I've never heard of a hitman hired in the last 30 years that wasn't an undercover cop, or an informant, or a con that turned the client in. Maybe I haven't looked hard enough, but you'd think that the legitimate hitman market would be hit pretty hard from the trend of police in their ranks. Not a divorce lawyer, but my sister just went through a nasty divorce. It sounds like a movie you would see on Lifetime. They split up after 28 years of marriage because he fell in love with a lesbian stripper half his age. He emptied their savings and borrowed against their 401k so the lesbian could start her own lesbian bar, which was bankrupt after 6 months. There are many more sordid details which I'll go into if anyone is interested. First of all, my now ex-brother-in-law is the least likely guy to do something like this. Imagine Mr. Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver cheating on Mrs. Cleaver. Totally unexpected. My sister found text messages on his phone. The lesbian in question already had 2 children. Yes, I know, not a very good lesbian, and was pregnant at the time she met my bro-in-law. The lesbian would show up at his work approximately once a week and get a check even though she was not employed there. He bought her a car and rented a house for her for a year, paid in advance. Even when all of this came out, my sister wanted to reconcile. At the first counseling session, he gets up after 15 minutes and says something like "Nope, not gonna happen," and leaves. So her divorce lawyer requests financial documents from his business to decide alimony and child support. I forgot to mention they have 4 children together, the youngest of which is in college right now. Anyway, he didn't want to release any of the financial documents pertaining to this business, so my sis says fine, I get the house and car and you get all the debt. He agreed to that, which makes me want to know what he's trying to hide by not releasing the documents. Anyway, the divorce was just finalized and my sister is devastated. This is the only man she's ever been with. They met in college and now 28 years later, nothing. The worst part is, if he asked her, I wouldn't be surprised if she took him back. I would lose all respect for her and do my best to talk her out of it. It was a real shock. I know that divorce is common, but not in my family. Mom and dad were married 49 years before mom passed and none of my numerous siblings went through a divorce. Big scandal. More sordid details are required to accompany my morning coffee while I pretend to work. I'm late to the party, but here goes. There's this rich couple that are suing a company for something or other. A guy on the jury is hanging out with a friend one afternoon, and his buddy starts telling him about this cougar he's banging. Supposedly she is a giant, controlling bee, but she spends a lot of her husband's money on him, so he puts up with it. Partway through the convo, he drops her first name, and the jury dude goes, "Wait, is her name?" Friend replies, "Yeah, do you know her?" Turns out it's the rich lady from the case he is on. The next day he had to recuse himself from the case because he couldn't look at her the same way. The couple's lawyer demanded an explanation as to why he was dropping out in the middle of everything. So he had to tell the judge, the lawyer, the lady, and her husband. Awkward. Anyways, that case was put on hold for a long time because they had a divorce to get to. Oh, and I've been a piece of crap lurker for like a year and a half, and this is my first post, so yay. My parents had an amicable divorce, agreed fully that joint custody was the best option for my brothers and I, and spent 18 years living near each other so my brothers and I would not have any issues traveling between. They treated each other with respect and respected each other's rules. If I was grounded at mom's house, I was grounded at dad's house too. Her house, her rules, and you will respect them was dad's response one time when I was complaining about how unfair life was. They never spoke critically of the other in our presence, never attempted to use or indoctrinate us against the other. They were flexible with custody times for vacations and whatnot, and even jointly cooperated on major life celebrations such as graduation parties and my brother's wedding. All of which, to say the least, is apparently absolutely crazy behavior for divorced people. Also, I probably don't appreciate my parents enough. My two favorites from working in a legal office. 1. Husband and wife get divorced. Wife went into the marriage with her own house and 3 cars. Him with nothing. She mortgaged the house in her name, as the bank wouldn't give her anything if his name was on it too. To let husband start a trucking business, buys all his trucks for him and pays off the mortgage herself. He becomes successful. They divorce. She just wants enough money from him to square her mortgage. He can have the business and everything else. He sells everything to his friend for $10 next to nothing so that he's got nothing on his name and doesn't have to pay her squat. She's now going to lose the house. 2. Custody battle over 2 children. Father threatened the mother with a shotgun, cut her phone lines, got charged for assault on her. She flees town with the children. He demands she come back, and she agrees to visitation so the kids can see their father. During one visitation he punches her brother in the face at the changeover point and tries to steal the children. Visitation stops and he chucks a fit that she's stealing his children and she's lying about being afraid of me. I did nothing. The court psychologist signs off that he'd be an emotionally abusive sole parent. When the court says no to his demands that he get sole custody, he verbally abuses the judge, his lawyer, his barrister, the psychologist, and the independent children's lawyer, in front of the entire courtroom. He narrowly avoids arrest, and the whole time this case is going he's always yelling and screaming in the office that the court system is biased and only women get custody. It's a mummy's court, you're all sexist against men. etc. No, you're just a douche. 3. Man has wife and 3 kids, everything in his name. Finds a younger model, dumps her by text message, changes the locks, and goes into hiding. Wife has a chronic illness that means she can't work, and now she's stuck with 3 kids, and to rub it in he's changed all the bills and payments to her name, mother's address and mailed her nearly $10,000 worth of accounts, and no one can find him. He sells everything to his friend for $10 so that he's got nothing on his name and doesn't have to pay her squat. I don't know what the law is like where you are from, but that really doesn't work anywhere that I know. Such a sale would be voidable on multiple grounds, undervalued transaction and transaction to defeat creditors being the big ones. Let's see. 1. I've had a client come in to file divorce only to realize that the other party already obtained a divorce. He lied and never properly served her and she defaulted. Had to undo that one. 2. Put 3 fathers in jail for contempt. They had a sudden case of raids, recently acquired income deficiency syndrome, and refused to pay support to their dependent spouses and or minor children. 3. Had a guy completely sandpaper key the finish of a brand new Maserati that was given to the wife pursuant to settlement agreement because he hated his ex so much. Also took off the tires. 4. Had a guy who funneled money over to his girlfriend, thinking he was slick hiding it from his wife. Girlfriend broke up with him and kept it. 5. Have a guy who got a $500,000 settlement, and so he prepaid all of his expenses up front for several years so he wouldn't have to pay up. 6. Had a guy put all of his properties in the name of business partners so as to put it beyond the court's reach, and thus the wife's reach. Had another guy claim he was unemployed but moved his paychecks to a friend's bank account. 7. Had to get ex-parte orders to inventory safes when I knew people had cash-based businesses, and injunctions to freeze bank accounts, so forth. Sometimes by the time we got it, it was too late and money was removed. 8. Absentee dads, sorry to be gender specific, suddenly become fathers of the year. Now he attends parent-teacher conferences. Now he goes to doctor's visits and soccer practices. Never gave a dang before date of filing. 9. Men with midlife crises spending tons of cash on the girlfriend, vacations, jewelry etc. Yet cries poverty when it comes to alimony and long-term marriages where the wife was a stay-at-home for the past 35 years. 10. One guy faked a divorce decree from another country to avoid paying alimony. 11. Guy was adamant, to the point of tears, that he never had sex with that woman. Took DNA test, was the father. 12. People wanting extra visitation just so they can get a reduction in child support. Then once the case is concluded, they leave the children with a nanny even though the other spouse is home and willing to care for the kids. 13. Had a guy stage a break-in at my client's home, stole her personal computer and other relics, then presents us with photo evidence he obtained from the computer about our client's infidelity. I have seen it all. Really. Had a guy who funneled money over to his girlfriend, thinking he was slick hiding it from his wife. Girlfriend broke up with him and kept it. Loved that one. I'm not a lawyer, but my parents divorced when I was 17 and it didn't finalize until I was 20. When I was a minor, my mom was saying I was living in another country with her when it was clear through school records I was not out of the country. She made up stories that my dad abused me and didn't feed me when in 2 months of living with my dad I had a much better life than 16 horrible years with her after I turned 8. Well yeah, once you're 18 it's adult napping. Everyone knows that. My ex-husband and I got divorced after 4 years. We had no kids, we were still dirt poor. So we went to a divorce center, paid a couple $100, and did it ourselves. We are still friendly 3 years later. People we know genuinely think our friendly divorce is one of the weirdest divorces they have ever seen. I know I'm late, but this story is too good. When I was young, my parents had milk delivered to the house each week. It was a good deal. The milk was from a local coop, and the delivery routes were privately owned. The owner of our route got divorced and told us the story of his mediation. She and her lawyer had calculated the value of his milk delivery business to be $2.50 million, mind you. This was the mid-80s. She of course is seeking half that amount. His lawyer begins to balk that their estimate is unfair. It was probably legitimate when you calculated assets, inventory, balance, lack of debit, and revenue, and they would never agree to it, but he is cut short by his client. Our milkman then looks across the table and says something to the effect of, "I agree to your estimation. Go ahead and cut me a check. Everybody shows up at 6. You'll have to be there by 5 to have everything ready for them." He then tosses the work keys across the table as he sits back down. They eventually agreed upon a more reasonable number. Frick yeah, chicken milk, my favorite. I've worked on precisely 2 divorces. They were both awful. The first was just a terrible abusive situation, sadly too common, and not a good source for stories. The second, though, was a mid-40s dink situation. Upper middle class engineers. Nobody was gonna go hungry at the end of it. Of course, we presumed it'd be a quick, painless negotiation. Nobody told us the husband was a raging alcoholic with no social skills. Nobody told us that the wife was very attached to the dog. We divided up the house, all possessions, the bank accounts, everything in under a week, except for possession of the dog. She was convinced he'd put the dog down. He kept saying it was man's best friend, not woman's. This case got slated for trial over who got the dog. I mean, that's downright extraordinary. That a divorce goes to trial at all is weird. That it goes to trial with no kids is weirder. That it goes to trial where both people are financially stable and well off is, like, comet hitting you unlikely. That it goes to trial solely over the possession of a dog is, so far as I can tell from talking to other attorneys, unheard of. So, pre-trial conference, and the judge is ripshit that any of this is going on. He orders a final attempt at mediation to begin after lunch. The husband sneaks away from his attorney to have a liquid lunch and comes back absolutely trashed. Starts yelling about how he's going to go home and kill the dog to deny her it. Tries to jump over the table, assaults a bailiff, runs out through an in-session court with the presiding judge on the bench. I never did find out how that one ended, as my internship ended before the case did, but I'll always remember it as the moment I decided that I didn't want to do family law. Fortunately for me, my current boss doesn't take those cases whatsoever. I had a batshit crazy client once involved in a dissolution of domestic partnership. Not married, but had been together 20 years. She had an insane amount of stories about the opposing party, drug dealer, he had killed a man, and all sorts of other wild accusations. No idea what was reality versus what she made up. They had millions between them and were fighting over every last Native American artifact, household item, etc. At one point she offered me gold nuggets as a gift because she liked me so much, which I had to ethically refuse as a non-de minimis gift from a current client. I eventually got off the case when I changed jobs. I think it's currently under appeal now, so I can't give any further detail, but there was some pretty crazy stuff involved in this case, including accusations that the opposing party was sleeping with his attorney, which shockingly had some basis in reality when investigated, but I got off the case right around then. When my parents got divorced, my mom told my dad she only wanted me and not my brother and sister. Dad laughed and said she should try that in court and see how the judge takes her only wanting one child while abandoning the others. My dad got full custody. She also stole all of the money from their shared account and left us for like 2 years while my dad had to beg and borrow money to feed us and pay bills after she drained the account. She didn't even show up for the hearing and the judge even asked if my dad wanted child support, which he declined, assuming collecting it from her would be more hassle than it was worth. My mom is a crappy human being. 16 years later and she hasn't changed a bit. I work with a woman who is a devout Christian. She met some guy from Nigeria online and fell in love. He was working as a Christian missionary in Singapore. She flew to Singapore. They got married and she helped him get US citizenship, etc. Eventually, she got pregnant and they had a daughter together. As soon as the girl was born, the father began getting her a passport and money together to take her to Africa so she could get circumcised. He eventually copped to marrying her solely to obtain US citizenship. She divorced him and was able to limit his supervised visitations to 1 hour per week due to his insistence on taking her to Africa to get the procedure done. He's still adamant to this day that his now 4-year-old daughter should have her clitoris clipped. I worked in divorce law for a bit more than a year, and then got the frick out. Some highlights of what I've seen. Guy cheats on wife with wife's best friend. Wife steals $6 million from his bank account and disappears. Guy gets multi-million-dollar inheritance. During divorce he spends it all on strippers. Literally the whole thing. Couple has over $5 million in assets. Spend over 3 years getting divorced. Couple has liquidated retirement and sold their house. Still not divorced. Lawyers have millions of dollars. This is largely the reason I'm done with this crap. Ethically I can see why you are done, but financially it was a terrible move based off bullet point 3. A couple of years ago my parents got a divorce. They're both very friendly people and they were always very cordial throughout the entire divorce process. In the end, the only thing they ever seriously argued over was who got to keep my pet rock from when I was in elementary school. They still argue over it to this day. That's really sweet actually. I'm not a lawyer, but I am in the process of getting a divorce. It's been quite messy, and that's without kids being involved. About 2 years ago my wife was cheating on me. Did not know until she filed for divorce. She actually does not even know that I know still. Anyways, March of last year she filed for divorce. We had been separated since April of 2012 for work reasons. We talked every day, saw each other on Skype and even visited each other on vacations twice in a 10-month period for 17 days each time. Overseas contract work, nice pay, but time apart. The plan was to save up for 2 or 3 years and then buy another house and move into that. Anyways, after she filed I tried to kill myself a few times. Did not eat any food for over a month. I was so stressed that if I tried to eat I eventually throw it up. I could not keep food down for more than an hour or two it seemed. Just water and the occasional binge drinking. We had all of our personal belongings in a storage unit. We were living in a 2,400 square foot house. It was full. We also had a few bank accounts. Now, I won't give an exact number but we had 6 figures saved up. Low 6 figures, but 6. During the divorce process everything was fine aside from me wishing I was dead. I had devoted nearly 7 years to her for nothing. We were coming to an agreement on who got what from our storage unit, and how much money each of us would get from the bank accounts, plus the division of the vehicles. It was looking pretty fair. She was getting a lot more than I was because I just wanted it done, so I was pretty much letting her pick out what she wanted. This was prior to court involvement. I had not even consulted an attorney myself even though she had one. Then just before we reached a deal in July of last year she went nuts. It was the 3rd of July while I was away at my family cabin. She drained all of the bank accounts. Every single penny was gone. She went to the storage unit and cleared all of the belongings out. Even my personal things like clothing, pictures, my important documents, medical records, everything I owned and had accumulated during my 28 years of life except for a bed, a desk and my computer with a few changes of clothes. She said I don't deserve anything since I want to be dead anyway and just took off. Had no idea it happened either until I got back from my cabin. It's still ongoing. We had court last month. It was hilarious. I hired a lawyer after she drained everything. She was breaking her own agreement. No assets were to be moved during divorce proceedings. My lawyer said he has never even heard of someone trying to disperse the amount of money she did, even with millionaire clients. I'm on the phone so I can't do too much for details, but that's what I got for now. I'm not a divorce lawyer but my dad is a lawyer and he's divorced, so WTH. My dad was a real gem when he divorced my mom. He had my mom served while my sister was in the hospital with neuroblastoma. She had radiation and chemo and was in isolation because she had no immune system to speak of. The process server had to go to the children's hospital, go to the cancer ward, and break my sister's isolation seal to serve my mom the papers. The nurses had to escort him out. Also, it was Christmas Eve, and my mom's car was stolen that night after she had just moved out of his house and had it filled with all our stuff and Christmas presents. This one is so horrible I just don't believe it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.